Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Politics Lab on YouTube. My name is Bill Muck. I'm a professor of political science at North Central College, and I'm joined, as always, by my colleague and best friend, Dr. Phil Barker, who's a professor of political science at Keene State College. Hey, Phil.
Hey, Bill. How's it going?
It's going well. So we had the final presidential debate. We are heading into the last week or so of the campaign. Where do we start? What was your reaction to all of this?
I wasn't sure if I was even going to watch the debate, and then I did. It was better than the first one. The muting the mics thing was nice, I think, because you actually got to hear the candidates talk. It was clear to me that someone had told Trump, you've got to be nice, right? You've got to like rein it in some way and
behave.
Yeah, it worked for, the first 30 minutes, and then you could feel it kind of ratcheting up. And then by the end, he was kind of back to full on Trump. But he was better, but I keep coming around to, as he still kind of was, crazy trying to latch on to the Hunter Biden stuff. All of his responses, and this I think kind of captures the Trump presidency in a lot of ways. All of his responses were, he would turn everything back to a critique on Joe Biden, attacking Joe Biden on the crime bill, on Hunter Biden, on whatever else. And at least with Joe Biden, he could attack Trump and then talk about like what he would do differently. And it just didn't, there was no substance of like, here's what I'm going to do from Trump. And with a week to go in this election, with coronavirus continuing to skyrocket, we've had like the last 2 days have been the two highest number of cases since the whole thing started. Mike Pence has an outbreak, in his staff. All of that stuff, I think it's just not going to matter. Like he needed to change the game in that debate, and he did better than last time. But all the the survey, the polling afterwards put it at like a 60-40. It lined up with Trump's approval rating in terms of who people thought won the debate. So I just can't imagine it actually mattering in this. Debates I think oftentimes don't matter that much. But in this situation where there's so many big issues out there, I don't know. It felt kind of pointless. What about you?
Yeah, I had a similar feeling. It was finally a real debate, unlike the first one, which was just sort of misbehavior by Trump all around. So at least you got to see the two candidates going back and forth on issues. And like you, I felt like Trump needed to have a dramatic reset. He needed to, I think, turn 180 degrees and be more focused on issues and less on behavior and the Hunter Biden stuff. And he did a little bit of that, but not much. He's better when he's on the offensive. So when he's attacking Biden, he's good at kind of undermining and finding the weakness in an argument. But as you noted, he's terrible at answering questions. There were some real questions about COVID, healthcare, race, immigration. And at the end of the day, Trump didn't have good answers to any of them. The immigration one where they brought up the issue of these 545 kids who've been separated from their parents. It's unconscionable. And Trump's response was, well, you built the cages. The Obama administration built the cages. Total dodge. And it kind of hurt. And I thought that was Biden's best moment there when he came back and said, this isn't who we are. This is, we've become a laughing stock. So I thought that was a useful exchange. But we saw, I guess, a more well-behaved Trump. But to your point, I don't think it moves the needle at all. I don't think it's going to fundamentally change the debate. One quick thing, I did notice is that there's a refrain of Trump arguing against Biden that he's a typical politician. That was somewhat new. That he's the same old kind of politician we've seen for years and years. He's corrupt. That was a new argument. I don't think it's going to be effective at this point, but at least they're thinking strategy.
I think you're right. And I think in a different election or a different time that might work. They're trying lots of different stuff at this point, but I think there are a lot of people who want the idea of an old fashioned, politician. Like we've complained about old fashioned politicians for a long time, but right now an old fashioned, going back to the way things used to be, I think is what is appealing about Joe Biden. I think Joe Biden, he's not super exciting. I don't think that he blew the doors off in that debate, but he's not Trump, right? This is an election about Trump. And Trump was who he was in that debate. I feel like people have had 4 years with him. People have made up their minds about Trump, which is why there are so few undecided voters. And that's where I don't know that if by Trump being calmer, but still being Trump, I don't know that he wins over anybody who was not sure about him. And I think Joe Biden, what part of what he's done is he's had this kind of low profile through this whole election. And I think in a couple of things this week. The packing the Supreme Court, where he came out this week and said, "I'm going to set up a bipartisan commission." Right? He's done really well at not taking the bait. In that debate, I thought some of his best answers were these. He wasn't, Trump would throw whatever Hunter Biden stuff or whatever else, and Joe Biden just wouldn't respond. There were a couple times where he had like a 3-sentence, a 3-word response. Like it's not true, and that would be the end of it. Like he would just stop at that point. And I think thought those were really effective, rather than like engaging in whether or not the Hunter Biden story was legitimate, or whether, rather than engaging in some of these kind of sort of crazy conspiracy theory stuff, he would just say, "That's not true. This is what I think," or whatever. And I thought those were some of his more effective answers. It just kind of takes the wind out of the sails for Trump. People talked about like for Trump, it was Fox News ease, right? It was like all the language of Fox News. And if you're not already in that universe, I don't think that anything that happened, that on whenever that was Thursday night made a difference.
Well, we see such a contrast in campaign discipline. As you noted, I mean, Biden has been on this message from all the way back to the primary, been consistent over time, and it doesn't matter what happens. They stick with the message. Doesn't matter who's pushing them. It's either the far left or the far right. They stay on message in a way that Trump can't. I mean, Trump can, when he's reading his speeches, he's decent. But then a gazillion other things pull him off, and then that becomes the story. So a lack of discipline, I think, is going to ultimately undermine that campaign. And again, they're out of time. There isn't much left for them to do. I mean, we're basically a little over a week out, and at this point, anything he does is not going to move the needle. I mean, we're just killing time.
And by estimate, a lot of the turnout estimates are saying that the turnout's going to be really high, and really high might mean 160 million people vote. But there are estimates that 50 million have already voted. So even if he does something to change the game at this point, you've already lost a third of the electorate has already voted. And so really they're running out of time in multiple ways. They have already run out of time for a lot of voters out there. So
and one final thing, and I think they're still running away from COVID. That's the one thing that the public wants to hear about. And they're still dodging that question. Before we started taping, you were talking about the Sunday morning shows. Yeah. They're still not answering the questions. They're still saying, it's right around the corner. The cure's there. They're not addressing that there needs to be a systematic approach to this problem, which Biden has been very good about, saying that I've got a plan. And even if it's not fundamentally different, that rhetoric is dramatically different.
The shows this morning, they're not even saying that there's a solution around they're outright saying now, as of this morning, they're saying we can't control it. Like, we're not going to control this pandemic. They're like just giving up, right? We just need to adapt. When you mix that with the sort of news that started coming out late last night and is continuing to develop, that like 5 people in Pence's circle have now tested positive. Man, when coronavirus is the thing on everyone's mind, when you go to vote, there are going to be coronavirus, whatever restrictions in place. It is on everyone's mind. And if your approach in the last week is we give up, and also we're having another outbreak, is not going to go well.
An outbreak in the White House and an outbreak across the country. It's the one issue that people are probably going to vote on or deciding their vote on. And it's just none of it is looking good for Trump. So, well, maybe that's a good place to wrap up. Yep. I'm sure we will talk more about this on the podcast on Wednesday. So please tune in and listen to that. Find us. We're all over social media, Phil, aren't we? They just got to look and you'll find us.
Twitter, Facebook, everywhere. Yep.
So, all right. Well, I will see you on Wednesday, Phil.
Bye, Bill.